forgot we don't have any
Oh
bowls.
my god. Okay. Finally.
Shut up.
What's up, guys? We went to do this Yorktown boat ride thingy. It was pretty cool. I thought it was gonna be a little bit more than what we did, but it was still fun. It was some cool stories. So this video is just pretty much gonna be a boat ride and scary stories that are true. Some of them are true. So sit down, get your snacks, get your drinks, and get ready for it.
Alright guys, are you ready?
Yeah. Oh, hey, this
Are we looking? Say what's up. Hey, what's up?
Are we talking or is it
Yeah,
a
it's
giant
video.
dildo that's aimed at my face?
It's a video.
Now, what's the probability of this to go down? Because what if we just
How's
sink?
everybody doing?
Scary movie. I'll be right back.
Pretty scared.
Please be quiet and courteous to others and silence your cell phones now.
They are sporting these new contraptions that just came out. They're called the Walkman, and they're listening to history on tape. Gus has got both earplugs in, the volume turned all the way up because he can't hear very well. Jerry's got one earplug in. She likes to listen to the history, but she also likes to listen to the sounds of the island. She wants to hear the birds singing, the waves crashing against the shore, the breeze whistling through the trees. She's up by the old church ruin. Gus, he's down by the shoreline. When an eerie feeling comes over her, and she happens to look back at Gus, and she notices on the James a fog rolling in very quickly. Within seconds, Gus is nearly invisible. Then the hair on her arm stands on end. She gets a very eerie feeling, and all of a sudden the Walkman stops. She also notices that the surroundings is dead silent. She doesn't hear anything. No birds singing, no waves crashing against the shore. Even the old ruin has now transformed back into what it must have looked like back in 1609 when it was first built. She's not quite understanding what's happening, but then she actually sees out of the corner of her eyes a group of people heading towards her from the tree line as they're coming towards her and the church. She notices as they draw closer that they're dressed in old colonial garb. Thinking that there's going to be a reenactment on the island, she becomes excited. But that excitement soon turns to fear. As the group draws closer, she notices that their feet are about 12 inches off the ground. As they draw even closer, she notices that they seem to be talking, laughing, and having a good time. But again, she hears absolutely nothing. As they keep on coming closer towards her, they don't even see her. They're looking past her. They pay her no mind. She's thinking she's invisible, so they can't see her. They get so close she could actually reach out and touch them. But she can't, because she's frozen with fear. As they go by her, they go one by one into the old church. She says she watches them just go by. When the last man goes into the church, he seemed to be about 20 to 25 years of age. He actually turns back and he grabs the door of the church and he stops. He's looking right at her. She's thinking to herself, surely he can't see me. But then he squints his eyes and he peers down and she's thinking, my God, maybe he can. And then his eyes widen and that's when he slams that door shut. Thank you. Thank you. All of a sudden, the Walkman comes back on. She can hear the waves crashing the shore. She hears the birds singing. The old ruin has returned to back the way it was. She happens to look down at her feet, and she sees the fog rolling back quickly. She happens to look back. It's about 30 feet to the shoreline. The fog, within seconds. Now she can see her husband again. Gus, not realizing what just happened, looks at her and just waves, unaware. But think about this. How many stories do you think Jerry McDowell told since her experience out on Jamestown Island? But also think about this. The stories that that young man told back in the 1600s of something that he saw that he couldn't explain. This is the time warp story. He would open up the window, tie the rope off, shimmy down and go running the 8 miles down here to Jamestown Island, and he would run along the shores for hours before heading back to that rope, exhausted, climb back up, hide the rope, get a few hours sleep before it was time to go to school. He did this many times, but one night he was seen by some colonists, and they watched him for a few nights, saw the path that he took. Then one night they laid in waiting for him out on College Creek. They waited for the little boy to run by, and when they did, they jumped him. They killed him. He was never seen again. But that little Indian boy's spirit still runs along the shores of Jamestown and through the college we marry, even still today. He has been photographed more than 2,000 times each and every year. How many guys have ever heard of Peyton Randolph? Who was he? Not a guy. You, sir, are good. Now, a lot of people don't realize that he was the president of the First Continental Congress twice here in Williamsburg, and had he not died, he would have been the first president of the United States. George Washington was quoted as not wanting to be the first president. He considered it more of a torture than an honor. Now, since 2011, the Peyton Randolph House has actually been in the news. Not for the news that you'd think, though. It's more of the paranormal news. Things have started happening inside the Peyton Randolph House and throughout Clone Williamsburg. This house burnt down by the British twice in the 1700s. I'm going to show you a photograph that was actually taken 18 years ago in front of this house. You're going to see a younger, thinner me in this photograph, but you're also going to see something happening behind me. You're going to see two windows up on the second floor that appear to be lighter in color than the others. This is the oak panel bedroom, and it is the most haunted room inside the house. More than 60 people have died inside this one room alone. Another 50 inside the house, and hundreds more were killed outside of the house. This house knows misery. I'm going to pass this around so you can all take a look and see what we're talking about. This is an original building, and in Clone Williamsburg there are 88 original buildings. All 88 original buildings are just like they were back in this time period, with 2 exceptions. They all have heating and air conditioning. They also all have motion detectors inside of them, and they're guarded by Clone Williamsburg security guards, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, in 2011, they're going to add one more security measure to this house. They're going to add video. Why? Because most of the Clone Williamsburg security guards will no longer go inside this house at night. I'm going to share with you why. What happened here in 2011? What brought the ghost hunters? Why did they leave in such a hurry? And why did they vow never to come back here again? Well, first, a little history about the house. Again, this is an original building. Its period date is 1722. It will not be acquired by the Randolphs, however, until 1744. John Randolph Sr. is 15 years old when he buys this house. His wife is 12 years old, and she is already 6 months pregnant with their first child. She will have 2 sons, John Jr. and Peyton. John, being a Tory, when the war breaks out, he goes back to England. Peyton and his father stay here. 2 years into the war, John Sr. is killed. He's going to be buried behind the College of Women building underneath the chapel. Peyton no longer needs this big house all to himself, so he's going to purchase a house across town, and he'll rent this house out. First, he rents the house out to a colonel in the Continental Army. The colonel will come here and he'll occupy the oak panel bedroom, and a few short months after he moves in, he will be stricken with a disease, and he's going to come downstairs, and he's going to stand at the fireplace for 5 hours, and he's going to take the pistol out. He's going to put it into his mouth, and he'll pull the trigger. Next, Peyton rents his house out to a young man who spent 2 years in the Continental Army, lost all of his friends and his family to the war. He has come here to attend the College of William and Mary and make something of his life. He is 14 years old. He too will occupy the oak panel bedroom. But shortly, he will be stricken with tuberculosis and he will die an agonizing death inside the oak panel bedroom. Peyton now decides to no longer rent the house. He sells it to the Peachy family. Mr. and Mrs. Peachy and their 8 children move in. Mr. and Mrs. Peachy will occupy the oak panel bedroom. And a few short months after they move in, Mr. Peachy will die inside the oak panel bedroom of smallpox. A few months later, his eldest son, who's 15 years old, will be in the backyard watching over his little sister, who's not quite 4 years old. Unfortunately, the neighbor had a 13-year-old daughter, whom he was a little more interested in. So he's not paying attention to his little sister, and she goes for a walk across the backyard, climbs into a barrel of rainwater, falls in face first, and drowns. He is so distraught by it. Oh, too little, too late now, pal. Stricken with grief, he decides to climb the large elm tree in the backyard and hang himself from it. His 9-year-old brother comes around the corner, sees his sister in the barrel of rainwater dead. His brother, hanging from the tree, also dead. He goes over to the barrel, he grabs his sister out and lays her down on the ground. He grabs a knife, he climbs the tree and he cuts his brother down, only to lose his footing, fall out of the tree, onto the knife, killing himself. Mrs. Peachy loses 3 children in 1 day. Could you imagine losing 3 of your children in 1 day?
No way.
All the rest for 5 remaining children all die within the next 6 months. All inside the oak panel bedroom, and all of smallpox. Mrs. Peachy goes out and lives inside this house for another 17 years before she too is found dead inside the oak panel bedroom. But every Monday through Friday, from the hours of 3 to 4, she would be seen inside the middle window off the left side of the porch, dressed only in black, with the family's black cat perched on her shoulder, waiting for her children to come home from school. All of the children that are now dead. In 1941, a famous photograph is taken of the house. And in the middle window off the left side of the porch, we see the silhouette of a woman with what appears to be a black cat perched on her shoulder. This is the only photograph that we ever had of Mrs. Peachy and that famous black cat. That is until January 12th of 2011. This is the night that Mrs. Alden dies. The night that Mrs. Alden died, we only had two groups that night. As you can imagine, in January, we're not very busy. Myself and Bob Fisher are the 2 guides working that night. We arrive at the house at the same time. When we get there, we see lights inside the oak panel bedroom. They never do any evening programs inside this house, so we're wondering what in the world's going on. Then Bob reminds me, we're doing some filming here for the HBO John Adams special and for the series Turn. So we thought, this must be what's happening. They're up there filming. We could not have been more wrong. About 5 minutes after we arrive, 4 Colonial Williamsburg security cars pull up. There were 2 guards in each car. 2 cars pull up on our right, 2 on my left. 2 guards come up to our group, say, guys, move your group back onto the grass about 50 feet. I said, why, what's going on? He said, we have lights inside the oak panel bedroom, and we don't know why. He says, and the motion detectors are going crazy. So just to make sure your group is safe, move them back. So we comply. We move back onto the grass about 50 feet. We look back, 8 security guards go inside the house. Well, we start to tell our stories. A few minutes later, somebody looks at me and says, look. I turned around and 8 security guards came running out of the house. They didn't even stop to lock the door, let alone close it. They got in their cars and they peeled out of there. Me and Bob, we looked at each other, we didn't know what was going on. We finished our tours, we went home. The next day, my next door neighbor, who was a police officer for the Colonial Williamsburg Police Department, came knocking on my door. He said, Carter, were you on the tour last night? I said, yeah. He said, what happened at the Peyton Randolph house? So I told him about the guards. I said, why? He said, we got a call to that house last night. 6 of our police officers went there around midnight. I said, why? He said, because Colonial Williamsburg security guards would no longer go inside the house. I said, did something happen? A strange look comes on his face. He says, Carter, I'm going to tell you something that I'm not supposed to. but I'm going to need you to promise not to say a word about it. I'm a tour guide, guys. I didn't say anything for 6 months, not until it came out in the newspaper. But I swore to him that I wouldn't, and I didn't. But this is what happened inside that house that night. He said, I was the section chief last night. 6 of our police officers went there. They had to report to me. Everything I'm about to tell you is going to happen within 10 minutes' time. He said, Carter, we had a shooting in that house last night. I said, I didn't hear anything about that on the news. He said, you're not going to either. It's being covered up. I said, why? He said, because of what I'm about to tell you. He says, you've been in the paranormal for a good many years. He says, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to give me some answers, because I can't quite put this together. He says, I'm going to tell you what happened. 6 of our police officers came here at midnight. 2 go upstairs on the 2nd floor. 2 go on the 1st floor. The last 2 went downstairs into the cellar. The 2 that go up on the 2nd floor immediately go to the oak panel bedroom, because that's where the lights are. When they open up the door, they draw their guns, and they step inside. He said, Carter, they saw balls of light inside the room. I looked at him and said, do you mean orbs? He says, I'm telling you what they said they saw. I don't know what they're called, but they saw balls of light inside the room. He said there had to be 100 of them inside it, and the room was just lit up like a Christmas tree. He said they could see everything, but they also see a pair of legs sticking out on the other side of the bed. Mrs. Alden, the last known descendant of the Peachy family, is found dead inside the oak panel bedroom. But in a rare interview, she was quoted as saying she never went inside this house unless she had guests visiting. And everybody that was a tour guide in Williamsburg knew this. So I asked him, what did the guest have to say? He looked at me and said there were no guests. She was alone. Now we have 2 questions. What was she doing inside the most haunted room inside the most haunted house that she never went inside unless she had guests? And what was it that scared her literally to death? Because we found out later in the autopsy report, she died of a heart attack inside the room. We'll come back to that. The 2 police officers that are on the 1st floor, they're busy themselves. They're chasing after 2 men who appear to be arguing inside the house. I said, who were they? He said, we don't know. You see, they only heard the men. They never saw them. He said they had heavy British accents, and the police officers swore there were times where they were right in front of them, but they saw nobody. The 2 police officers that went downstairs into the cellar weren't down there for 3 minutes when both their flashlights died at the same time. One reaches into his pocket, pulls out a Bic lighter. Says, I'm going to stay right here. You go out to the squad car, get the other flashlights. They never leave each other alone. They always stay together. This night, however, will be different. While his partner's out at the squad car, he will hear 2 gunshots from downstairs in the cellar. He and the other 4 police officers go running to the cellar door with their guns drawn. At the bottom of the stairs is that one police officer, with his flashlight and his gun pointing up the stairs. They tell him to drop the gun. He doesn't move. After a few minutes of coaxing, one of the police officers said to hell with it, and he walks right down in the line of fire. He said, when I got down to him, I put my hand on the hand with the gun, and I looked into his eyes. He said his eyes were glazed over. It was like he was in a trance. I told him to give me the gun. He doesn't move. So I reached in and I grabbed the gun and I pulled it out of his hands, and another shot fires, narrowly missing me going into the last step. Those 3 bullet holes are still there for you to see him even still today. They bring him out to the squad car. He's really shaken up. So I'm thinking that they give him some coffee and donuts. I'm just assuming this part. And a few minutes later, he's able to talk. They said, what happened? He said, I was downstairs waiting for my partner to come back, when all of a sudden my flashlight came back on. I started looking around when I heard something atop the stairs. Thinking it was my partner, I shined the light up. I saw a black man. He had no shirt, tattered pants, no shoes, no socks. Mind you, it's January 12th. It was 18 degrees outside, and this is how he was dressed. He said as he's walking down the steps slowly, I see a glimmer in his hands, and I shine the flashlight, and in his hand, he was holding an axe. I quickly draw my gun, and I tell him to stop. He continues to walk down the steps, but now he starts to raise the axe. Just before he's ready to throw it, I yell out again to stop, and then I fired 2 shots into the man's chest, and he disappeared. Since this has happened, that black man has actually been seen at least a dozen times that I know of. Most recently, this past August. We actually had 2 maintenance men down there working on the air conditioning unit. They said that they actually had the wrenches in their hand when they saw the black man. Then they saw he had the axe. They threw down the wrenches and they took off. We never did find out if they actually fixed the air conditioning unit or not. But the night that Mrs. Alton died, that's when things started to happen. Not just inside this house. All throughout Kelowna Williamsburg. Kelowna Williamsburg was a paranormal hotspot. We had over 20,000 paranormal experts visit Kelowna Williamsburg in 2011 alone. Not because of what I just told you, but because of what happens next. 3 weeks after Mrs. Alton's death, there's going to be a freak car accident on Route 5. 3 of the security guards who were inside that house that night are killed in the accident. Not only are they killed, they're decapitated. 2 more will die of cancer that they didn't even know they had in less than 2 months of her death. The last 3 all committed suicide. The 3 that committed suicide all talked about the house and the suicide note and how it had haunted their dreams ever since they went inside. The police officer moved to Tucson, Arizona, and he was no longer in law enforcement. But on July 4th of 2011, he too committed suicide. We now have 10 deaths attributed to this one house. You have Mrs. Alton, the 8 security guards, and the police officer. Ghost hunters are coming from all over. We had TAPS, Discovery Channel ghost hunters, ghost adventurers came here, all wanting to go inside the house. They will all be denied. You see, they have one rule. They go inside the house. They go inside alone. They don't want anybody to compromise their investigation. That's a deal breaker for Kelowna Williamsburg. Because like I said, we have priceless artifacts inside these houses. So you go inside, you will have 2 interpreters with you the whole time. So the group of ghost hunters that do get the nod to go inside this house are amateur ghost hunters from Chicago, Illinois. And the only reason that I know this, my roommate at college, Mike Stout, is the lead investigator for the group. Even when we were at Syracuse, Mike used to take me to all these places in upstate New York. We'd go to Binghamton, Cazenovia, Skaneateles, Cortland, and we would do ghost hunts. Mike was always searching for the truth. Mike calls me up, says, "Carter, we're coming to Williamsburg, and I got you to thank for that." I said, "Yeah, I know," because I told him about him. Mike has 2 women and 2 men on his team. The name of the group is called Friday Night Frights out of Chicago, Illinois. They arrived here September 23rd, 10 o'clock in the morning. But before they came, Mike says, "Can you tell me everything there is to know about the Peyton Randolph house?" And I told him. He said, "We'll get together and we'll have dinner." I said, "Okay." September 23rd comes, Mike and his team meet the 2 interpreters in front of the house. They go inside, they get all their video equipment, all their audio equipment, all their ghostly doodads set up. They go back to the hotel to get a few hours sleep. They arrive back at the house at 10 o'clock at night to start the ghost hunt. Mike says, "Carter, when we got to the house, we saw the oak panel bedroom and the lights that were beaming out of it. We told these guys that this is where we want to go first. They argued with us for 10 minutes before they finally unlocked the door and let us in." He said they locked the door behind us. We go up the stairs. They unlocked the door to the oak panel bedroom, and then they stepped back. He said, "When I opened up the door, I didn't really know what to expect." He said, "But Carter, when I opened up the door to the oak panel bedroom, I literally gasped. I couldn't believe it. I saw the balls of light." He said some are the size of basketballs, some the size of large softballs, and some of the size of golf balls. He said, but they were all different colors. The room was lit up. He said for the first 30 or 40 seconds, all we did was take photographs from outside the room to inside. He showed me these photographs. He had about 200 of them. It looked like the room was filled with fireflies. There was no distinction in size or color. Now, he says we walk into the room, and as soon as we walk into the room, the balls of light started to melt into the walls, the ceiling, and some even into the floor. He said within 15 seconds, every ball of light is gone, but there's a glow inside the room that stayed there all night. He said we could see everything just like it was midday. 15 minutes in, we start to get EVPs. We hear what sounds like children crying, a blood-curdling scream, followed by a gunshot. Mike now starts to talk to the ghosts. He says, "Why are you here? What do you want us to do?" He said, "Carter, it wasn't even a second after I said this. We got another EVP. This EVP said, 'Get out.' It didn't just say it once. It said it 7 times. once for each person now inside the house. Each time it said it, it got more intense. He said the last time it said get out was like someone was screaming at us to leave. Mike says that's it. We're going to hold an EVP session in each and every room, and that's exactly what they do. They go to every room, and they hold an EVP session. Mike says, Carter, it's about 2 o'clock in the morning when we decide to go back into the oak panel bedroom because we're not having much luck. He says, we go back into the room, and one of my ghost hunters said something blasphemous. He said, God damn it, show yourselves! You are like a plant. You are doing the best for me that anybody else could do. You are just all over the place. When he said that, he was like, oh my God. They just stood there. This boy is on the ground. He's in agony. Because he says Carter, when I turned and I looked at him, somebody here, it was like somebody had a hold of his legs and somebody else came running by and knocked him down. He went down hard. He went down so hard that he bounced off the floor. He broke his arm in 2 places. He's in agony on the floor when they get another EVP. This EVP said, I said get out. This time, it only said it once. They took this as a sign. It's no longer safe to be inside the house. They have someone who needs medical attention. Mike's team takes the young man out to the van. Mike and the 2 interpreters are still inside the house. Mike's at the bottom of the stairs. The interpreters are locking up upstairs. When they start to come down the stairs, Mike turns and he takes a photograph of them, just as they started to fall. In the photograph, we had this on our website for 1 day, when Colonel Williamsburg made us take it down. You see, Mike made a deal with Colonel Williamsburg. Every bit of evidence that he found was theirs. He got to keep none of it. So we took it down, but in the photograph, you saw the interpreters falling down the stairs. But you also saw the silhouette of a man wearing a trifold hat with his arms extended behind both their backs. They left here calling this the most haunted house in the United States, vowing never to come back here again, and they haven't. But Mrs. Alden, the last known descendant of the Peachy family, loved to have people come and visit her, and anytime she did, she would give them one special room to sleep in. Guess which room? When asked, why do you give your guests the most haunted room inside the house to sleep in? Her response, I want to see their face when they come down to breakfast. If they make it to breakfast. A dear friend of hers, Helen Hall Mason, a schoolmarm from New York, will come here on holiday. Mrs. Alden will pick her up at the train station at 11 o'clock at night. She says, I'm so tired, all I'm going to do is go to bed. We'll talk in the morning. Mrs. Alden says, okay. She takes her up to the oak panel bedroom. She opens up the shutters. She lifts up the windows. Nice breeze coming in. Helen's going to get a great night's sleep. Not. But she said goodnight to Helen. And then she went to sleep in her side of the house. Helen said she was having a great night's sleep. But she said around 2 o'clock in the morning she's awakened to the sounds of someone calling her name. She said it was a deep, throaty voice. And I can only imagine that it sounded something like this. Helen. She wakes up and she looks around the room and she sees no one. She turns to the nightstand and she picks up the alarm clock and it says 2:03. She sets it back down and when she turns at the foot of her bed, she sees a woman hunched over, wringing her hands and shaking her head. Her first thought was, this was her dear friend, Mrs. Alden. But when her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she realized that this is not Mrs. Alden. She said this woman is actually wearing 18th century bed clothing. And in her own words, she looks a little weird. The next thing that she sees is going to make her sit upright in bed like she's been on the business end of a red-hot poker. Because the clouds are going to give way, and the moonlight is going to shine through the window, directly through the shivering hands. When she sees that this woman casts no shadow and the light passes right through her, how many of you have ever been so afraid like in a dream you couldn't get out of? You couldn't scream, you couldn't move, you were paralyzed with fear. That's exactly how she felt. She said the whole ordeal couldn't last more than 30 or 40 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When she finally got the nerve to get up out of bed, she said the shivering hand stops, looks her in the eyes, and she says, "Get out." Well, Helen said she didn't get a whole lot of sleep that night. In fact, she starts to get out of the bed and head for the door when the room goes completely dark. She doesn't see a thing. She stops. A few moments go by. There's a lightning flash. She sees the shrew. She sees the door. She takes 2 more steps. The room goes dark again. Again she stops. A few moments later, another lightning flash. And there's the shrew between her and the door, just wringing her hands and shaking her head. And when again she stops, looks her in the eyes again, and she says, "Get up!" Helen said she didn't get a whole lot of sleep that night. She was still toying with the idea. Should I tell my dear friend what I'd seen? Or should I keep quiet, for fear she's gonna think I'm crazy? When she comes down to breakfast, she says, I'm gonna tell her. And she tells Mrs. Alden exactly what she had seen. Mrs. Alden looks at her and says, yeah, I kind of thought you might have seen her. She looked at her and she said, what? Then she told her what happened 6 months earlier, when her sister and brother-in-law came to visit from Kentucky. They too were given the old panel bedroom. But at 2:30 in the morning, they came running out the front door, ran around the back, got in their car, and they drove to the Holiday Inn in Richmond, Virginia, dressed only in their pajamas. When she told her this, she was furious. She said, hold it, you gave me a room that you knew was haunted? Well, let's just say there's very unkind words being spoken inside this house. But she went and stayed at a hotel here in Williamsburg and had Mrs. Alden visit her the rest of the trip. Now, the thing to remember is when the war broke out, John being a Tory, he went back to England. Peyton and his father stayed here. They both died here. Now the war's over. John goes to King George, says, hey, that's my house over there in Williamsburg. You need to give that back to me. King George looks at him and says, hello, we lost the war. I can't give you what's not mine to give. Well, John said be so upset he died soon after. We've got a little problem. John's last will and testament is to be buried with his brother and father here in Williamsburg. Well, he died just before June. There's no means of refrigeration, and it's a 4-month voyage. John's gonna stink up the ship. Well, they got a great idea. They got this great big barrel, and they fill the barrel up with rum. And they put John down in the barrel to pickle him. John's a tall guy. He doesn't fit. Yeah, so they pull him back out. They cut off his legs, put him back in, shove a leg in each side, tapped it up, put in the whole ship. Now, what's supposed to happen about 2 months in that voyage? When those sailors ran out of rum. Yeah. They heard about that big old barrel down there. So they went down, they had a drink on old John. Now, we didn't hear a lot about it, but they did say that rum, well, it had a full body flavor.
Oh my God.
And John was said, me much better spirits was when they left. And that is the story of the Peyton Randolph house.
Nice.
Believe it or not.
Alright guys, that's the end of our spooky boat ride video. I hope you liked it. If you don't follow me already on Instagram, Keanan_Perry. Check out my merch, riskclothing_co. Website will be right here above my head. Right here. I'll size it. Boom. You want to be the outro?
I want to be the outro, so show
You want to be the outro?
Stop!
Okay, so I guess we're gonna put another outro. We'll do 2 outros for you.
It is harder than it seems.
Let's see how you do it.
Okay guys, so that was our spooky season video. Oh, I said spooky season.
See, I'm good because I'm natural. I'm me. Can't be all
I don't
fake.
like saying guys because I have no fans. Okay guys, so that was our spooky boat ride video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you don't follow us already on social media, I'm Non-Toxic Revolution, and that's Keanan Perry _.
Keanan_Perry.
Okay guys, so that was our spooky boat ride video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe down here. If you want to follow our socials, they'll be up there, as well as our merch link to our website, riskclothing.co.
.com. She forgot it. What about the Instagram?
I said our Instagrams will be up here.
Oh. Where the...